here because we want to improve healthcare in America and around the world. And I think it's really critical that we hear from experienced people that have done their own startups and have taken their companies to the next level. And that's really the point of tonight, is to hear from some experts and founders who have created some amazing healthcare technologies and experiences and practices that have really improved health and helped patients, helped physicians as we change our healthcare system for the better. So that's really what we're here for tonight, and you're going to learn a lot, I hope. We hope to have a lot of questions from the audience, so please, we're going to make time for Q&A at the end after we hear from each of the panelists. And I want to thank a couple critical people. First off is our sponsor, CityMD. Thank you so much. Dr. Richard Park, thank you. And Dan Rothman, who's our head of corporate development. A round of applause for CityMD. They've only been in this beautiful space for 2 weeks, so I think this is one of their first outside events that we're having here, so thank you for letting us break it in. And I also want to thank other sponsors, New Jersey Institute of Technology. They are helping us with this event, and you'll hear from Judith Schreft in a minute, talk about their innovative venture that they have going and how possibly your company could participate with them in a partnership that they have with JP Morgan. So you'll hear about that in a minute or two. And I also want to thank a longtime supporter of Health 2.0 New York City, Joe Daniels from Loeb & Loeb. And they've been great supporting us. So I also would like Joe just to say a couple words about one of our founders of Health 2.0 who started the group way back when, and something unfortunately tragic happened last night. If you're a commuter on Metro North, a terrible event occurred, and I'll let Joe just say one or two things.
There's no light on. Here we go. Good evening, everybody. Tonight we mourn the passing of a great woman that helped this group in many ways. Ellen Brody and his lovely wife Ellen and their 2 daughters helped us launch MedStarter at an event much like this in 2012. Ellen Brody was the embodiment of the phrase, "Behind every man, there is a great woman." Yesterday, in a tragic accident in Valhalla, we lost Ellen, and we are all less for losing her. For almost 2 decades, through thick and thin, she supported Alan and his iBreakfast, StartupPalooza events, book writing, and anything else Alan dreamt up. Without the support of our long-suffering spouses, we would never be able to chase this crazy dream of entrepreneurship or change the world. Few did it as well as Ellen Brody. As the silent force of organization and leadership for the community, she was also like a mother to startups, including MedStarter and many other companies in the room tonight. Maybe you just thought she was a volunteer helping run an event, but truly she was the volunteer. We remember her smile and love for Alan and this community, and we'll miss her dearly. As we try to fix healthcare, let us be reminded why we do this. For the people like you and Alan and Ellen. Let us raise a toast to Ellen Brody, the mother of 1,000 startups.
Thank you, Joe. And our hearts and minds go out and thoughts go out to all the families that were affected last night by this tragic accident in Westchester. So, okay, we're going to get started. And first off, I'd like to introduce Judith Schreft from NJIT, who's going to talk a little bit about a wonderful program that we're excited about. And we thank you for your sponsorship of tonight.
Thank you. So how many people know NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology? That's great. Sometimes people get us confused with a lot of other things. We are New Jersey's Science and Technology University located in Newark, New Jersey. Maybe some of you know about us because our basketball team has been doing pretty good recently. Did they win yesterday, Michael?
They did.
They did? Okay, great. Very good, very good. So we run on the innovation and entrepreneurship space. We have an incubator called the Enterprise Development Center. It's New Jersey's oldest, and we think actually one of the country's largest technology and life sciences incubators. We currently have 90 companies in residence in the program, doing everything from medical devices, drug development, cybersecurity, e-learning, green energy. One of the programs that we just started recently is through a grant that we received from JP Morgan Chase called Health IT Connections, and you've got some cards there. JP Morgan Chase is focused through an initiative that they're calling Small Business Forward on creating clusters in critical technology areas across the country. And the cluster that we're focused on with them here in the New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut area is really with health information technologies. And we define that pretty broadly as everything from medical records technology to mobile apps to technology that can be used for hospitals, for managing clinical trials, drug development, all those kinds of big data, Internet of Things applications. JP Morgan Chase has given us money, not you money directly, but us money, and actually my co-PI, Michael Ehrlich from our School of Management, funds to be able to work with companies who have some level of market traction, about $250K of revenue, who need that oomph, connection, support to get to the next level. So if you're interested, we've got a website you can apply. You can talk to myself, you can talk to Michael, two of our colleagues, Travis Kahn, who's our program manager, and Tamara Williams, who's our event planner, are here tonight as well. You can talk with us about the program. If it turns out you're not quite ready yet, that's okay, because there's going to be other things that we do in the program that everybody in the community and the cluster can participate in, and you might be ready in a couple of years, because this is a 5-year grant, so we're going to be running lots of cohorts and creating the community. And Adam from one of our companies is here to talk a little bit about that, and hopefully he'll give you some great real-world experience from someone who participated in the program. Again, we're delighted to be part of this program and to be here with you all in New York City.
Okay. You also have a card on your desk from MedStarter, which is one of our sponsors, and they are the #1 fundraising site on the internet. So it is the Kickstarter, but it's for healthcare. It's been incredibly successful for a lot of people that have been to these meetings, that have come for years and went on basically MedStarter and raised a lot of money. So it's a great way to get started. You can talk to myself or Adam Griff, who's here as well, about MedStarter and how to get involved with it. And you can get more information, obviously, on medstarter.com. So, okay, we're going to get started. And as we go along, please tweet at #H2NYC. So there's an active group of people that are watching live on medstarter.tv and tweeting. So please join in that conversation. So I'd like to introduce our fantastic group of panelists tonight. First, at the far end of the table is Dr. Richard Park, and he is our host tonight at CityMD. He is a board-certified physician in emergency medicine, as well as having an MBA from Wharton. Undergrad, okay. And has gone on to basically found CityMD, which is an incredible success story with 38 current urgent care clinics in the New York area. So a tremendous success story, and he will tell us more about his journey and how he came from an idea all the way to this beautiful space on 6th Avenue. Next to him is Joe Daniels, who works for Loeb & Loeb, and works with a variety of startups and successful companies from early stage to late stage, and has helped them with a myriad of issues, from financing to investment rounds to regulatory issues and all the host of issues that you engage with as you are growing your startup. So we're happy to have Joe here. He's also on several committees and groups within the New York City area, and we're excited to have him on board. Next to him is, as we mentioned before, Adam Turinas, who is CEO and co-founder of Practice Unite, which is designed to be a healthcare platform for HIPAA-compliant mobile communications and collaboration, which is something that has always been very important to me in terms of finding a way to get physicians to better, more effectively communicate with their patients. And I know there's a lot of activity in that area, and we'll look forward to hearing more about Practice Unite. Next to him is Michael Ehrlich, who is associate professor who works at NJIT and has years and years of experience in helping startups and understanding financial models and helping companies basically get off the ground. And then next to him is Adam Griff, who is COO of MedStarter and formerly was head of SarahCare, which was a very successful chain of elder care centers. And he helped grow those centers to 40, I believe, in the US and worldwide, and very successful. And as you know, elder care is a growing business today and something that we're all facing with our parents and an aging population. And Adam is also a designer and architect, so he very much understands how to bring that patient experience and that overall space built in such a way that it really is helpful in protecting people and keeping them safe and improving their health care. So we'll be happy to hear more about how Adam grew that company and what he found to be most effective. So first, we thought we'd go around the room and basically let each person answer the question. You know, what was it that you did that you think helped your company get to the next level? You know, it's a journey. Starting a company is hard. I've started 2 digital health ad agencies over the last 20 years. And starting it is exciting and fun in the early days. And then always you're going to hit some brick walls and you've got to find ways to get over it. And it's constantly a challenge finding a way to be creative, strategic, have the focus that you need and the talent that you need and the network you need to really find success. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Richard Park, about CityMD. And if you could talk a little bit about what was it that you encountered and some of the solutions that you found that kind of helped you get to that next level.
Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. So there's a lot of self-reflection going on as an entrepreneur, and I got to share a few things. I've never been a leader of anything. Okay, so I've never been accused of being a leader. Every book I've ever read about leadership, I'm not that person. So how did this happen? And so I've read a lot of books, and it always talks about getting the right people in the right place. And if I have to say there's one thing that I did right was to get great partners. So number one, to have great partners and have people in the right place. And I guess that's the biggest thing I've learned. Second thing is to be in the right field. Urgent care is burgeoning now. Had I to do this now, it probably wouldn't have worked. Right time, right place. So those 2 things, hopefully that's an encouragement for many of you that are developing leadership skills or not natural-born leaders, because I certainly am not.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Daniels. I'm a partner in the corporate and the capital markets groups of Loeb & Loeb. It's a law firm of about 350 lawyers and 5 offices throughout the U.S. and 2 in Asia. And I'm also the head of the national venture practice. And I've been doing this for 19 years. And this is, to me, helping companies with formation issues like granting equity that vests over time and protecting IP, helping companies raise money in angel and VC and other financings, helping companies expand through acquisitions and partnerships and commercial agreements, and handle liquidity events like the sale of the company or the IPO. So I've basically represented a lot of tech companies, to put it that way. And I've been exposed to the whole life cycle of these companies. So I took some notes on what I thought takes companies to the next level, and to a certain extent that depends on where they're at, right? So as a complete startup, I see that to get to the next level, generally 3 criteria have to be met. And by a startup, I mean anything from a founder with a business plan to a company with up to 10 million in revenue, less than 80 employees, and it's usually not profitable. First of all, the right team. People that can do all the activities that are required to get to your first major milestone, whether that's being cash flow positive or 1 million users or regulatory submission and approval. For instance, if you're making a mobile application, usually the first founder comes up with the idea of the product, but then you have to have the product fit the intended market. And you're always trying to discover what that market is, and it has to be big and so forth. Hopefully the founder is enough of a visionary or does enough market research to figure all that out. And next, somebody has to actually develop the application software and the user interface. And usually what I see there is either a CTO that teams up with a CEO, or a CTO that works with the head of product, a couple of developers, and maybe a UX person or 2. And then you have to have someone that creates market demand for this product, gets the product into the App Store, uses social media marketing to get people aware of it, or even television advertisement. And so some people hire a CMO to do this because they think they don't know how to market. or sometimes you just have the CEO or the CTO figure that out. And then the other two factors I think are important are a huge market size. What does huge mean? To me, a big enough market so that getting to the next level actually matters to somebody, namely usually an investor or a group of investors. You get funded because you get there. And finally, probably the most important factor is momentum, or what some people call traction. And that, to me, is defined by whatever the appropriate metrics are for your company, demonstrating customer adoption, whether that's unique visitors, subscribers, revenue, partners, or what have you. And then I wanted to say briefly about a growth or a late-stage private company. What I see among the VCs, what they're looking for is basically a company with a 10 million in revenue run rate. It only has, it doesn't have to be for the full year. At least you're hitting that for a couple of months. You're profitable, or you have a clear path to profitability. And to me, that what I usually see them excited about is a 10% ratio between EBITDA or net income and revenue. A strong historical revenue growth rate, like hopefully 25% quarter on quarter. And the fact that you're positioned to scale up rapidly if you actually raise $5 million, whether it's a roll-up strategy or just a great marketing plan.
Thank you. My business is actually a business that happened by accident. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I had a couple of goes at it earlier and it wasn't so successful. I was involved with a number of startups, but basically other people's businesses. And I had worked for many years in various professional services and marketing agencies. And I left that business, and I was doing some consulting, and was having breakfast with a mate of mine called Stu Hockren. Stu is a doctor. He'd been practicing for 30 years. And we were talking about the business that I was doing, which was kind of focused on communications. And he said, well, do you know that communications is one of the biggest problems in healthcare? And I said, well, frankly, I don't know that much about healthcare. I know about every other industry except for healthcare. And we talked about the fact that if healthcare was a country, in terms of the size of the economy, it'd be the size of France. And this is an economy which is going through the biggest transformation of its life and has a massive communication problem in making that transition. So we thought, well, if we applied what we were doing in other industries, we'd be able to apply that to healthcare, we might be able to help. So we started a consulting company together, and that was in sort of late 2011, early 2012. And we got some traction through some relationships that he had, and we sold some projects to a hospital or two. And we were at a conference, and on the way back from a conference, Stu asked me a question. He said, I wonder if there's an app for this. And he was driving, and I just started doodling on the back of a piece of paper, and we sort of said, I wonder if it had this button, and maybe it could do this, and maybe it could do that. And we thought, well, actually, this makes sense. And we got a designer to mock it up and turned it into a PowerPoint and shopped it around to some hospital CEOs. And a couple of them said, hey, you know what? You build that thing, we'll buy it. And we then brought in another friend of mine called Ed Guy, who's a PhD in software development, and happened to be at NGIT's EDC. And he helped us put together a team of developers. And about 6 months later, we had a product piloted at Jersey City Medical Center. And we then sold it to them. And that was 2013. So now we're into just about to start a full third year of operation, and we have about 15 customers, most of them hospitals, also some home care agencies. And back to the question about what was the key factor, it is always and always will be about sales. That is being the key determinant of our success. The way that we've got to that is by having the right team. And that's been just an extraordinarily happy accident. We don't actually yet have an official head of sales. We actually were lucky in that the three of us together seem to actually make what's needed in a good salesperson. I know the sales process. I know how to manage long, complex sales cycles. My partner Stu had never sold anything in his life, but happens to be one of the best sales guys I've ever met, and is an extraordinary evangelist because he's so passionate about what we do. And then the third leg of that stool is Ed, our Chief Technology Officer, because any CIO meets him and said, these guys can actually deliver. And so as we've evolved the business from one step to the other, the question we keep asking ourselves is, are we selling hard enough? Are we getting proof from the market that we actually have something viable that's here? And in terms of the stage that we're at, we're still at a pretty early stage. 2012 was the idea stage. 2013 was proving to ourselves that we had a viable product. Last year was about proving that we could turn it into a viable business. And this year is about seeing if we can actually get some scale out of this thing, and we seem to be doing that all right.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question first. Who here is an entrepreneur? Okay. Who here is an MD? Good, some overlap. Who here is a technologist? Excellent, more overlap. Okay, so we've got this new program, this JP Morgan Health IT Entrepreneurial Connections program. And what we're looking to do is find entrepreneurs, doctors, startups who have business ideas. Now, this is actually not for strictly startups. We need people that actually already have a product and a customer, and we're looking to try to take these startups and turn them into scale-ups. So actually, Adam was in our first cohort. He was brave. He was in our first cohort. We're starting our second cohort in just over a week. But we're looking for people that want help to get themselves from 250,000, or most of our companies' average is probably $1 million or $2 million in trailing 12 months revenues. And the question is, but those companies, which are great companies and have customers and have products and they're having great success, but the CEOs are probably working 16 hours a day and trying to hold it all together. And the question is, how do you get to profitability? How do you become a $20 or $30 million company so you can actually make an exit and have a good life? So, because if you're a CEO of one of those companies, you're not yet having a good life. I mean, you may be having fun, but you're working hard. So the question is, how do you get to that place? And how do you scale up? And so what we do is we have a program where we actually run you through. There's a classroom component of it, but it's not introduction to entrepreneurship. It's kind of like the graduate school version. And we're trying to help you figure out, what do you need to do in order to make the strategic partnerships, make the connections you need? What do you need to do in order to turn your idea and your development, your first technology, first customer into a product that you can sell to a lot of people? And so that's something that we'd like to have you potentially participate in doing. Okay, so my story. So my story was, I've been an entrepreneur since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, okay? I mean, the answer is, I have been doing entrepreneurial stuff forever. I just was telling Adam about a business I had when I was a 14-year-old, selling people sailboats. I mean, I've been doing stuff for a long time. But I love small business. I've been an angel investor for somewhat over 30 years. So I have some successes. I have many, many failures. I've made a ton of mistakes. I've learned something, and I'm still learning. So having fun with that. I'm relatively new as an academic. Actually, this is only my 8th year as an academic, which in academic years is kind of like a small number. I actually was an entrepreneur before that. I had my own startup. We started up. We went like crazy. We did really, really well. Around 2001, 2002, we did really, really badly. I went from 30 employees down to below 20 employees. We barely survived. We rebuilt that, and I sold that company in 2007. And prior to that, I had a career on Wall Street. So, so I had a pretty good run as a trader. So what I would tell you is, if you're an entrepreneur, you know you're an entrepreneur. You basically just can't help yourself if you're an entrepreneur. You just kind of keep thinking up new stuff and doing new stuff, and you're asking questions, and you're curious, and you're trying to find ways to add value. And I love adding value, and I love little companies. And I've had my own. I've worked on my own. I'm a director of several right now. I have investments in a bunch. I'm kind of at a place where I'm no longer prepared to be CEO of a new startup. I've done that. So I will tell you the 2 most exciting days for an entrepreneur: the day you start your company and the day you sell your company. In between, you can have some fun, but those are the best, okay? So enjoy those 2. But anyhow, the answer is, look, I hope we'll have some more questions later. I don't want to monopolize, but pass it on to Adam.
Okay, great. So my name is Adam Griff. I'm the CEO of MedStarter currently. Everyone shared a lot of great things, but I think what I would like to draw on is a little bit of my experience with being an entrepreneur with Sarah Karen early in a startup. And I think the thing personally as an entrepreneur that you always have to balance is to be self-critical and an amazing listener, and at the same time being very confident and determined. Right? You have to absolutely believe in what you're doing, but you can't be blind to what's going on. And those are 2 diametrically opposed ways of thinking that you have to be able to balance to be a successful entrepreneur.
Okay, that's great. I think right there you heard kind of a spectrum of critical success factors or things that really will make a difference in terms of your ability to take a company from an idea all the way through to success and champagne and the exit. But some people don't, and it's great. I want to ask each of you a question that kind of covers a different aspect of kind of the journey and hitting those next milestones. One thing that you know, in the companies that I've been with, we talk about kind of having a great vision. You know, we have a great idea. It's like, it's fantastic. We see the market opportunity. We do the research. The customers say they want it. You know, we find the economics that say, yes, big market, we can make big money here. Now there's the big challenge, which is execution. And I think about CityMD and your idea, which I think is, you know, great vision, critical need for it, big market, and a lot of it really depends on execution. It's that experience at that retail level. If it's not perfect or doesn't go the way you want it to, you kind of lose your customer base. And I'm just wondering if you could talk to a little bit about, you know, how that vision came to be in reality of that execution and how you kind of oversaw that execution.
Okay, that's a great question. Let me try to answer it. And self-reflection. That's ever since I was a little kid, all my friends were at the cartoon section of the bookstore. I was always at the self-help section. Okay. It started really early for me. That was not meant to draw laughter. Thank you. Okay. So with that being said, nothing happens overnight. So I'm an ER physician, ER doctor by training. But most of my training happened with my dad. So all we ever did was open stores and close stores, right? So it's ironic, about 20 years ago, I didn't go to high school. I didn't go to college. I went to high school. I go right to college. I opened up a 1-hour photo store. And it's ironic today, I am doing the medical equivalent of a 1-hour photo store with an MD, 77th and Lex. So I grew up looking at garbage, looking at retail, looking at sites, and that was in my blood. So we're doing that here today. So you have to have some expertise, okay? And everything kind of builds on product. So we opened our first urgent care 10 years ago, and I worked it. But what makes a good founder is not necessarily what makes a good execution person or a good CEO. So I learned very early on that I am not an operations person. Okay? You have to self-assess. The chance of you being a great founder and a great execution person is almost zero, statistically. Fortunately, again, this is a teamwork. I had great partners early on that were relatively way better than me at operations. So, you know, my job is to impart my personality to the company, the ethos of the company, why we do things, how we do things. So that's my job. It's culture and values and the vision. But I knew that I wasn't an operations person. So Ned Shami, who's now here today, it's not just, Ned Shami is also another doctor, but he was our CEO at the time. And he's since moved on to strategy officer because he's no longer appropriate for the size of this company. We now have almost 1,400 employees and 38 sites. And we've seen 1.6 million unique patients and almost 1 million patients a year. So at a certain scale, I'm not going to be able to handle that volume. Neither is another doctor. So you have to know your limitations. And so the character, the personality of the company is mine, but certainly the execution is certainly not mine. It's all Ned Shami. And so I want Ned Shami, if you're watching, to hear this. And so we appreciate you.
That's great. Joe, question for you. Given that you're kind of having this multitude of clients and seeing kind of where they go and what they do right and what they do wrong, a startup company that, let's say they have a couple clients and you talked about $10 million, what are the mistakes that they can make at that point in time? Do they kind of get out too far out in front of themselves? What do you see most often that people should think about avoiding, you know, not getting too far down that path and really hitting the right things at the right time.
Sure. I mean, you had told me that the question was going to be, what are the regulatory hurdles that you have to, get through to get to the next level? And you did, but it's a totally different subject matter. So I got this. I asked one of my regulatory partners for all the issues. I got
Your curveball. Sorry about
It's
that.
fine. It's fine. So this is an area that I know a lot more about because this happens with every kind of startup, whether it's consumer product or medical device, mobile application, whatever. The first thing that is an issue is, I just said that one of the most important critical steps is to find the right team. The problem is that so many people get into bed with wrong team members, and they go down that road for quite some time. They may actually even achieve a lot of operational milestones for their company, whether that would be developing the product, maybe getting some initial sales or whatever it is. But for some reason, there's just a personality conflict. In fact, I just had to help the CEO of the company, which owned he owned 75%, fire the COO who had 25%. And that COO did many great things, but he actually had concluded that he wanted to be the CEO, and there was just a difference of opinion in respect of overall company strategy. So the problem in this was not that the problem that I'm going to point out did not exist in this case. But what if there were no documents? What if you had promised each other, the CEO is going to have 75%, the COO is going to have 25%. It's effectively an oral agreement, or it's in an email. The problem is that when you fire the COO or the CEO leaves, that person has automatically got 25% or 75% of the company. It didn't vest over time. So that's one of the key things. We want to put agreements in place that make sure people stick around. And that if they don't stick around for, let's say, the full 3 years, which is the typical vesting period for a founder, then some of their stock is repurchased because they didn't earn it over that 3-year period. The other major problem that I've seen in recent years, or actually throughout my whole practice, is that oftentimes with the technology company, you have numerous people coding or developing semiconductors or otherwise inventing brand new inventions, right? And under the default common law of all the 50 states, if that person is being treated as a consultant, like they're getting paid zero, and they're just vesting in equity, if you have not had them sign a basic document, which is called an invention assignment agreement, then that person who invented those things can argue that they invented them after hours, it was their own separate project, whatever. And these disputes very commonly arise where there's a difference of opinion, there's a parting of ways between the person who developed the technology and the company, and you haven't got the person to sign that. Or even if they are an employee, you've been paying them, you've been withholding taxes from their pay, giving them a steady paycheck. They just say, oh, I just developed it on with my own equipment on my own time at home. And then they end up suing the company right before, maybe right as you get a term sheet for your Series A round where DFJ Gotham and, let's say, the Foundry Group are going to give you $5 million on a $10 million pre-money. This happened to me in 2007 to one of my clients. For $250,000, because that was the value of the services rendered in engineering this code, which really wasn't that relevant to the company software anymore. But unfortunately, it was installed on so many mobile devices that unless that all those users eventually agreed to update that software, that was a big part of their business, right? And eventually, it didn't matter, like in a year or two. But the VCs insisted that lawsuit be settled, and the poor company counsel Joe Daniels is dealing with this mad dog plaintiffs litigator in Jersey, who will basically do nothing, will accept exactly $250,000. He'll drag it on forever. They filed in state court. When you go to state court in Manhattan, I'm a transactional person, so I didn't really deal with this very much. I didn't know this. What happened in this particular case, and apparently what often happens, is the judge said, you guys, you should settle this case outside of this courtroom, because if you don't, you're not going to like the decision whichever way it goes. It's going to be some kind of joint ownership of the IP, and you're not going to get your money. And he had to pay off a tax lien, and because he didn't pay payroll taxes for his consulting firm or whatever. So we had to settle it, and we basically finally convinced the VCs to pay this person $250,000 to get him to walk away. Those are the two key things that always come up. I can talk about valuations and all that other stuff offline.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. I'm going to jump over to Michael for a second. I have a question for you. One of the things that I recently went through, and I find a lot of companies, they don't have the right value proposition or pricing model. They're not charging enough, they're charging too little, they're on a monthly subscription fee, or they're on a annual licensing model, and it just, to me, and they debate it and they wrestle back and forth over it. No, it should be this way, it should be that way, and to me it seems like you're throwing darts at the wall with some of these companies, and yet that's probably one of the most critical things in terms of determining what your revenue curve is going to look like over the next 5 years. What, from your experience in the finance world, how do you help companies? It could have a great piece of technology, fantastic. We've seen that with a lot of the startups in California, but they have no idea of how to monetize it. And I'm just curious what you tell startups in terms of when you look at it and say, whoa, wait a second, how are you going to make money off of this? If you could just say a couple things about that. I'm sure you have some stories about that.
I do, so let's start, before you get to sort of there, let's start at the basic problem. The basic problem as a startup is trying to figure out how to start up. And if you're going to need some resources to get yourself going. In fact, the definition of an entrepreneur, by the way, is someone who has a great idea but not enough resources to make it happen. That is actually the textbook definition of an entrepreneur. So you don't have enough resources to make it happen. So the question is, how are you going to make this thing happen? Now, it is possible that you are very lucky and you have an Uncle Ted who loves you and who's going to be prepared to give you the money, and that's friends and family, and that happens, and that is a good thing if that happens. But if you're not, and you don't have your own Uncle Ted who loves you, then you're going to have to figure out how to find the resources. So the first resource probably going to come out of your pocket. They're going to come from friends and family. But what you need to do every single time you think about getting some resources is you need to think about, how am I going to take this value proposition which I'm claiming, and how am I going to make it less risky and more valuable so I can raise some more money so I can do the next step, okay? So your thought as an entrepreneur is not about actually, I would argue, the first problem is not sales, or it's not whatever. Your basic problem is, how do I take this thing, this idea, this concept, this startup, how do I move the ball forward, reduce risk in a way that allow me to attract more resources so that I can then take the next step? Greatest single source of resources are your customers, okay? Much overlooked, amazingly, but customers. And so if you're solving a really good problem, one that people really feel is something that is a pain for them, then they're going to be prepared to pay you to solve the problem. And if you're doing a great job, then what you can do is kind of what Adam was talking about. You can actually convince people to give you money before you actually have an actual product. You will convince them to actually pay you to develop the product that's going to be the solution for their problem. And that is really one of the classic great source of money, classic in terms of bootstrapping. I'm kind of a, who here has kind of heard about the lean startup? Anybody read the book by Eric Ries? Oh, good, look at that, man, wonderful. Anyhow, so those guys are great. Steve Blank is great. And that idea of trying to sort of be resource light in terms of going into your business is really a good strategy. It's not always strictly possible, but you want to be as resource light as you can. Okay, so that's kind of setting the stage. Now, so the question then is, how do you put together your really financial model is really the question that it was just asked, right? And so how do you put together your financial model? And of course, who here has put together a financial model? It's like one of those 5-year jobs, goes out every single month, projecting out the next 5 years, that says everything that's going to happen. Anybody done one of those? Yeah. So those are wonderful. Those are among the most wonderful works of fiction ever known to man. Basically, if you can predict what's going to happen in revenue in 3 months, you're pretty heroic. 60 months. My God, what is going to happen in month 60? If you're there, yeah, give me your card. But so those are works of fiction. We know that those are works of fiction, but they're very important because what they do is that is one of the ways you tell your story. As an entrepreneur, you need to figure out how to get those resources. You need to go out there and tell your story. You need to figure out, how am I going to get these people on board? How am I going to get this customer to give me some cash today so I can build the product that they're going to buy later? And so, you are out there telling the story. So you said sales. Really, I guess that is sales. But it's telling your story. Now, a financial model is a very specialized way of telling your story. And if you want to raise money, you have to learn how to do it. So we understand it's a work of fiction, but it's your way to tell your story of what you think is going to happen, what you hope is going to happen, what you expect is going to happen. Now, you don't actually need all the resource up front. You can actually show that in year 2, you raised $5 million from, DFJ Gotham. Hey, Yay, great. And there it is in year 2. Now, DFJ Gotham didn't get that memo, but hopefully they will by the time comes. But it's telling your story. So a financial model points out what you think is going to happen, what you hope to have happen. Now, you're going to update your financial model, but if you can put together a compelling financial model and you can have assumptions that are defensible, then you can actually find people who will invest in you. And so making yourself more credible and making yourself look less risky. Now, part of that, again, comes from the process of what I effectively call turning dots into lines, right? When you make a pitch, you're kind of creating a little dot. You are telling somebody where you are, what you hope for, your story, whatever. I hear lots of dots, okay? I probably hear 50 dots a month, okay? So just so we're clear on this. So, but the key is to try to turn that into lines, okay? So what you need to do is you need to come back 3 months, 6 months, a year later and say, okay, here's where I am. Now, I'm going to look at those 2 dots, and I'm going to say, here's where you were, here's where you said you were going to be, and look, darn it, they're there. And, then you've created a lot more credibility for yourself. You've shown that you're less risky, which makes people want to invest in you because, of course, now you say you're going to be there, and hey, it looks like you did that. Let's, take a shot on the next one. So your financial model is how you tell your story. And so it's important. You can't raise money without it. And it's a giant creative fiction. But that's okay because it's based on your belief, your aspirational story. It's your story. And you're gonna pivot and modify. I mean, one of my entrepreneurs actually hates the word pivot. Who here? Does anyone hate pivot? I'm tired of pivot. Okay, I'm done with it. But anyhow, she actually says, she makes so many adjustments in her business. She doesn't call it. She calls it the shimmy. She's constantly making adjustments in terms of adapting to the reality and what she needs to do, right? I mean, the answer is so it's not like a pivot. It's just a shimmy. And it's constant. I mean, it is just ceaseless. So the point is you're going to shimmy. It's okay, and that's just part of the search process, and it's part of the fun, and enjoy it.
Great. All right. Question for Adam T. Adam T. Sorry about that. Since you're a fellow Mad Men, years and years in the agency business, and communications, you mentioned is so important, and it's not just the communicating to investors and telling your story. Part of it is really about communicating the promise of what you're going to deliver to your customers, and what you expect from them and what they can expect to you. And I see a lot of high-tech companies that do great technology, but they really overlook that aspect of it from the standpoint of, is this really intuitive? Is it really going to be able to allow for the communications that the customer wants? And I know you have a platform that you built and you have customers. What are you seeing already in terms of results, in terms of the communication flow, and how do you determine if it's working or not?
Right. So it's a really interesting question because in our case, it's communications in many different ways. So and it's interesting. When we started this, we started it with an idea of solving the big macro problem in healthcare, which is one of the big macro problems in healthcare, which is hospital-physician integration. So we've been to this American Hospital Association conference, and all they would talk about is hospital-physician integration. It's all about communication and relationship building. And that's when we originally conceived the application. That's what it's about. Well, the market actually then tells you, no, that's not what your product's about. And what they told us about is your product's actually about communication between doctors and nurses and staff and home care aides. And it's the micro communications that you're helping with. And actually, the application in terms of broad communications, it's helpful, but it's not its strong suit. So it was a bit of a wake-up call in a couple of regards, because first of all, we sort of realized, well, wait a second. The idea that we came up with was not what the market wants to buy this product from, but the good news is they want to buy this product for something else. And that was a good moment and a bad moment, because it was a good moment because we realized, hey, there's actually a real demand for this. We can really help with care coordination. It's actually probably a much bigger opportunity. It was a bad moment in that we realized, oh, wait a second, there are a whole bunch of other people who are doing this, and we hadn't even thought about them a year ago. And so there was quite a long moment of soul searching of like, should we even keep doing this? Because we're not at the point nor do we really want to go out to the VCs and try and beg them to give us, $1 million, let alone $20 million, which one of our biggest competitors has just done, raised $20 million. But we decided to stick at it. And what we decided was, the one thing that we were doing differently was the ability to customize and to provide communications in different modes. So rather than just text messaging, but the ability to do voice over IP communications or communications of data from the EMR to the physician when they need it. And so we said, we're going to be the customization company. So another aspect of communications is our outwards communications and starting to build our brand early. And so we built our brand on this notion of customization. And we had a wonderful moment of vindication. We were at an M Health conference a couple of years ago as part of the Startup Health Pavilion. And the CMO of one of our biggest competitors came up and started sort of going, oh, you guys are here. And he was being quite patronizing. But he said, oh, you're the customization guys. Like, yeah, that's us. I was like, thank you. Kind of vindication. Oh, we're never going to do that. That's not what, we'll never go down the customization route because that route's not scalable. So it was great. Two things happened. First of all, our brand was getting traction. The other thing is that we had customer proof points that said that was the right positioning for us. And the second thing is our biggest competitors said, you can have that competitive space. We don't care about it. So in terms of the results, what we found is that the impact of what we do is on that sort of micro communications. And it's on things like shortening the care time. And rather than talk about ROI, we've got some ROI stuff. I think this is actually one of the most powerful things I heard about was one of our users, who's a senior doctor at one of our hospitals, told us a story. He said, he had a small child come into the emergency room at about 5 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. And I'm not a doctor, so I'll probably say this wrong, but he had an upper airway obstruction, and it was probably an abscess or some kind of an infection. So he was on his way home. So he said, let's admit the patient into the hospital, and before we take them up, just order some labs, and I want to get a CT scan as well. And then he went home thinking, I'm going to be calling the labs, I'm going to be calling the radiology department. I'm going to be calling all over the hospital trying to find the residents. I'm going to have a long night of trying to figure out what's going on with this kid, not knowing what we're going to do with him the next day. He got home. His app went bing, opened it up. The critical lab results were delivered directly from the EMR to him. He then got another one that actually gave him the impression from the CT scan. He then sort of picked up the on-call list, which helped him kind of figure out who was the resident on call. He was able to find the resident who was on call. He texted him. The resident texted back what was going on with the patient. He then booked from his home. He then booked the OR room for the next morning at 7:30. He showed up the next morning at 6:30, operated. The kid was done and back in his bed by 7:30. And he said that shortened the time by about 12 to 24 hours for that kid to get treated. So economic benefit, obviously, to the hospital, because they're getting a fixed amount from the insurance company for taking care of the patient, and the patient's probably going home a day earlier, and the patient's happier because the patient doesn't have to stay in the hospital where they're probably going to get sicker. So, in terms of ROI, when we started this thing, we all sort of started it on the basis that we thought we've got a wonderful opportunity to get rich. But what we hadn't really realized is, wait a second, this is actually making an impact on people's lives and helping doctors and helping nurses do what they do better, and helping actually impact the lives of the patients.
I think that's great. I mean, when you think about it, one size doesn't fit all in a lot of solutions. And that level of customization is going to be critical. And I like your word, micro communications, because it really is micro communications when you think about workflow in healthcare. There are tons of conversations that are going on and intersecting with each other and redundancy, and how do you streamline it using technology. But if you don't understand that ecosystem and how the communications flow, you're never going to solve that problem. So I think that's really interesting. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Design, as I like to call him sometimes, Adam Griff, who is an architect, and we've had a lot of talks about kind of how people, don't put design first when it comes to healthcare. And I told him about one event I went to where Sloan Kettering worked with a lot of high-end consultants like IDEO and some very expensive companies, and I don't even want to think about how much they spent on this, but they hopefully they have the money. They created a chemotherapy lab out in retail center in Brooklyn, and their goal was to rethink chemotherapy. And they basically, challenged their staff to rethink it, and they had an architect who had experience in creating retail health, and they redesigned the chemotherapy so it was, not what it was today, where you have to wait a long time for your drugs to get prepared, you have to wait for the labs to get done, and it could take hours and hours. And they wanted to be able to get these people in, get them their chemo, and get them out in a reasonable amount of time, and make the experience a little bit more quality of life, because they might not have the survival rate that obviously we all want for our loved ones. And they really created a unique design experience. And so that opened my eyes in terms of what design can do. Adam, can you talk a little bit about some of the things you guys did at Sarah Care with design from an elder care standpoint, or another example?
Absolutely. So I think for Sarah Care, maybe a little bit of background on Sarah Care and kind of the approach to design. So what we were trying to do at Sarah Care was a comprehensive aging-in-place solution. And the thing that we found is that your aging loved ones oftentimes ended up in nursing homes, which was never their first choice, not because it was clinically appropriate, but because the caregiver was overwhelmed. So you had a great term here, which was micro-interactions. So the task of being a caregiver is very hard and very complex in terms of all the different relationships you have to manage, to support, to help your loved one, the coordination between different physicians, multiple chronic diseases. And so, where the design for us kind of really came in was to be an enabler for caregivers, and come up with kind of the right set of solutions, the right kind of, as you would call it, micro interactions that let them take care of their loved ones successfully and not let them be overwhelmed by it. And that brought us into all sorts of areas that we normally would never have thought of going into. So simple things like, for instance, if I'm caring for my mom, it is really great to be able to pick up my dry cleaning and my groceries and have them delivered to the kind of day center where my mom, or the rehab center where I'm picking up my mom, things like that. And that's design. And so for me, design is really to, like a lot of lean startup methods, is to create your service from the perspective of the customer, as opposed to create your service from the perspective of your business and what's easiest and most efficient, and find a way to take what is often, as you put it, disregarded as too hard, not scalable, too expensive. And the process of design is finding a way to do that in a way that you can make money.
Okay. I made these guys do a little bit of work. I'm going to make you guys do some work. So you've heard a lot today already about the critical things that you have to think about when you're doing a startup. How you can actually build the right team. What gets you to that next level. Is it financial? Is it the communications and figuring out what are the optimal communication workflows that you've got to deal with? It's not just the technology. There's so much more to it. We have this great, amazing panel of experts that have been rolling up their sleeves and building things for years and years and years. I'm going to turn it over to you guys. So let's get some good questions going. Come on. I saw people taking notes. Anybody who wants to start it off? Okay. You want to go ahead?
Hi, everybody. I'm Marty Jaramillo with Yingo Yango, startup health company. I remember your company at the Startup Health Pavilion. I think I'd like the panel to talk a little bit about one of the mantras at Startup Health is about knowing your customer, really knowing your customer. We have a concept called your customer either has batteries included or batteries not included. And it's a wonderful way of thinking, because when you have that customer that really gets it, they're your partner. And we're all in this brave new world. And particularly when you're trying to get those strategic partnerships, close that first deal, knowing the long sales cycles, that having that customer as a partner, thinking of them that way is crucial, I think, for success. Because I tell, I mentor a lot of young entrepreneurs too. Is your customer, but you also have to know your venture capitalist too. You have to know you have to know where you fit in the venture capital world too. You have to know where you fit in the workflow of that potential customer too. So that's kind of like some insights on knowing your customer.
I think that point is just so spot on. I mean, the whole lean startup thing, and also the program that Michael and Judith have created, is all about being customer driven. And this is something which was sort of intrinsic to the way that we've approached it. I don't even think we realized we were doing it. And we were lucky when we started, because we had a customer where the CEO really believed in what we were doing and was willing to take a gamble, which actually in healthcare is actually quite taking a risk in healthcare is understandably quite rare, because if you take a risk in a consumer packaged goods company, you might sell less potato chips. You take a risk in healthcare, people die, and so it's understandable that it's a risk-averse industry. But we had a CEO who was willing to take a risk on us and back us, and the rest of the team around him, like the CIO, got around it and said, we're actually quite happy. We'd like to be your sort of other incubator, because we're in this incubator in New Jersey. But they said, we want to come up with new ideas. And by listening to them and them telling us what the product was good at and what the users felt the product was good at, that's helped to shape the product. I'd say probably 90% of what we've done since we started has been a customer or a user saying, we want you to do this, and listening to that. And we redesigned our process to be customer driven. It's a request from a customer or from a user. We go in and we'll get feedback before we roll it out. We'll test it with users beforehand, and then we're constantly getting feedback from users. And we think that will help us be successful.
There's a question over here. Dave.
Hi, I'm Howard Reese. My company is called Healthy Practices. I want to talk a little bit about competition, and I want to direct a question to Dr. Park. And to me, one of the great things you've done with CityMD is you have taught the New York metropolitan area that it's okay to use urgent care. And now a major competitor, North Shore Long Island Jewish, announces that over the next several years they're going to build 50 urgent care centers in the New York metropolitan area.
Why didn't someone tell me that?
How do you guys react? I mean, they've played their cards. What's your play?
I don't know yet. No, and seriously, it's easy to say you were going to do urgent care. It really is. It's easy to say something you're going to do. To execute is a completely different matter. So this kind of goes back to who the customer is. And let's talk about that alliance. You have healthcare systems opening urgent cares. When you think strategy, this is how the typical practice thinks. And I don't know how this applies to the tech world, but in our provider, when we interact with patients, when doctors think about how they're going to strategize, they think one of three partners. Either it's going to be the insurance companies or the payers. So which payer am I going to partner with? Or what other doctor group am I going to partner with that's going to benefit me? It's all about me. Or the third leg is, which hospital system am I going to partner with, right? So is it going to be Cornell? Is it going to be NYU, North Shore LIJ? That's the limit of our thinking. No one ever partners with the patient, right? So again, you have to partner with the patient. Now, fundamentally, what we do at CityMD, so this is very specific to our world, but I guess you can take your lessons and apply to your own company. We are doing what's good for the patient. And what's good for the patient is to be Switzerland. I have to make sure that your patient gets back home. So whether you're North Shore LIJ, or you're Pro Health, or you're whatever, Mount Sinai, and it doesn't matter. My job and duty is to the patient. And so I get that patient back home. It's good for society. It's good for the patient. And when you do the right thing, governments notice. New York State notices. The insurance company. You do the right thing, you should be rewarded. And so that's how you deal with competition, by doing the right thing. It's so hard to do the right thing. It's so easy to cheat. When you do the right thing, good things happen. So that's how we deal with the competition. And if they do the right thing, God bless them. We should all work together.
I should share something because I've had the opportunity to represent Tenet and Universal Health Services, and they're not very big in this New York City metro area because they're it's a regulated market, but they're all over Texas and California and stuff. What they do to compete with each other, they go into a market where the competition is already doing well, and they have a hospital or an urgent care facility and a hospital and a psychiatric thing, and they basically offer equity to all the doctors that are referring patients to that hospital or that are working at that other urgent care facility just to move over. So that might be a good idea.
So I actually work for North Shore LIJ, and I work for CityMD. And I can tell you that having worked in both urgent cares, the way you deliver the care that you deliver makes all the difference. So there's a big difference between the way North Shore LIJ does it and the way CityMD does it. And I can tell you, CityMD is highly efficient. And so I think North Shore LIJ, I don't know what they'll eventually do. I'm sure maybe it'll be just as good, but I think there's a difference between, you can have competition, but it's like the Apple and, I don't know, Samsung. They're same, but like really different, So I kind of think it's the same thing. It's vastly different, and Rich is right. Like CityMD is really patient-oriented and really patient-centered. It's a different experience for the physician as well. So.
Thank you.
Oh. This is a question for Joe and Joe and Mike. You can also probably jump on this one. My name is Laura Hirschlag, and I'm from Israel. We're talking about what it takes to get your company to the next level, but nobody actually described what the next level is. And my question for you, and anyone else who wants to address it, is what would be your top tips to companies that are not American companies, that are overseas, understand that if they don't break into the U.S. market, they're not going to survive. So for them, the next level is getting to the U.S. market, and they probably need to raise funding for that. How would you start out advising a company who would come to you and say, we need to raise investment for our healthcare startup to enter the U.S. market?
Yeah. To me, your first question is, what is the next level? And to me, it's always the next funding round. Because I represent a bunch of fast growth companies, usually tech companies, that kind of thing. And I represent numerous Israeli companies. So the first thing that they struggle with is, do I have to move to the United States? And thankfully, they usually move to New York when they move to the United States for whatever reason. So then that's my market, so that's good. The answer is yes, in my opinion, because frankly, let's see what the other people on the panel think, but nobody wants to invest in a company that's, 8,000 miles away or whatever, 10 hours by plane. It's just hard to manage, right? Your investment. People like to manage their investment. Ideally they like to have monthly or quarterly board meetings and see what the performance is going like and all that. Go ahead, tell me, what is your different idea?
Well, we are starting a program that's going to be at NJIT.
Okay.
Okay.
where after we've raised funding for the Israeli startups, we are going to establish a U.S. subsidiary and hire local talent, people who are experienced, are from the field, have the network, know how to talk to board of directors and investors to manage the marketing and sales operations of those companies here, because honestly, as you can tell, I grew up in America, but I lived in Israel a long time, and I really think Israelis need to stay in Israel. I know there's other Israelis in this room, but I'm particularly talking about scientists and R&D people. They're amazing people, fantastic. They don't understand the business world at all. They cannot speak the language, and frankly, they don't have the cultural nuances. Even I don't, after having been brainwashed living in Israel for so many years. But I also grew up in New York City, so that's another.
No. I know what you're saying. I mean, if you can raise the money first, and then basically open a U.S. beachhead,
That's
and
what we're
people
doing.
are doing that cross-border, every which way across all the countries that you can imagine. Basically, some guys at Mitsubishi that own a bunch of land around the Tokyo train station came to me and said, "Can you get some American startups to open branch offices there in our facilities?" And we can help them raise money. We can introduce them to lawyers and service providers of all types and sales professionals who can work the Japanese market and just generate sales for them, and they won't have to have hardly any expense in opening this up.
Without making this a discussion between the two of us, I just
Yeah.
so assuming that we have that in place already, and the company has a U.S. presence and a very personable leader here,
Is that
what
you?
would be your next advice for the companies needing to raise money?
Oh, the next step for the company needing to raise money. I mean, it's the same advice that you give to any company needing to raise money. You want to try to reach those milestones that I mentioned before, and you need somebody who can actually put together a 15-page deck and go out and pitch it around here. But you spin it as an operation that is both located, maybe even headquartered in the U.S. and Israel.
Okay, we have another question over here.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I just have a more general question. So I have been hearing from all my friends about the importance of innovation groups at larger companies and all sorts of other sectors of technological innovation. And I'm just curious what the panel thinks about the innovation departments that are now starting up in this area, and whether they're going to be meaningful contributors to what's going on in New York, or whether it's just a fad of the moment, or what.
Anybody? Michael?
So, innovation is not something you just kind of open up a can and kind of pull out some innovation. Innovation comes from
Yes, but that does seem to be the philosophy of many large corporations today in America.
I know. So you really need to create kind of a culture and a place where innovation can flourish. You need to create a place where people can take chances, where they can make mistakes, where they can learn. And learning and failing is absolutely the way you succeed. Okay, I mean, the answer is, all of us learned how to walk, and the answer is many of us fell down a few times before we learned how to do it. And that's going to be true for pretty much how you do a startup as well. And so if the corporations can create the culture where they allow people to experiment, where they allow people to fail as part of the process, and they don't immediately get executed for, failing, then they will be able to create innovative cultures and ecosystems within their own firms. Certainly, some firms have actually historically been very good at that. I mean, Amazon has actually been very successful at creating a quite innovative ecosystem. Others, frankly, have been less successful. So, Microsoft is famous for not really being able to put an innovation together in a way that's coherent. So, so I don't think it's a matter about creating an innovative department. I think it's a matter about creating an innovative culture. I think it's about allowing people to take chances and fail.
So is anyone leading the way in health and medical innovation?
This is a especially difficult place. I mean, it's highly regulated. Literally, the issues are life and death, and it's hugely expensive to get into the marketplace. Yeah, so most of the drug discovery. So actually, I think most of the drug discovery is actually taking place on NIH's dime, actually, at universities and remote centers. And then what happens is it goes up the commercial chain. And that goes back to sort of that issue that we were talking about. Sort of, basically it's a series of steps. And, and if you're a drug developer, I got a company I'm working with. Basically, if you want to develop a drug, right, you can for $150,000, $250,000 actually come up with a compound that might do something. And if you want to then kind of test it in animals, for like $500,000 total, you can probably actually get some results that show up in your mice. But to actually get that drug then through clinical trials and all the regulatory hurdles, it's after that first $500,000 or so, it's another billion, and that's billion. And so it's not so easy. So you really need, that thing I was talking about before, where you really need to kind of keep de-risking it and figuring out how to get to the next step so that you can achieve some milestones, achieve some hurdles, and then kind of get that next round of funding so you're able to get to that next step is really the key to that.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of companies, and to me, they talk innovation, and it's nice. They put it in their annual report, but I totally agree. Your company is innovative or it's not. And if you want it to be, you've got to transform your culture and encourage it, incentivize it, give people the room to really do it right. And if you're just going to put it in a press release, and that's not going to do it. So let's, next question.
Yeah, hi. I have a very broad question. I'm a physician, and it's maybe especially applies to CityMD. How do you factor in the outcomes, the healthcare outcomes, into your revenue models, and how are you responding to that, to the overall look at sort of outcomes as a measure of success, as opposed to just simple, who'll buy it?
If I understand your question, is how are we providing clinical value?
Yeah, I mean, how do you know your patients are getting better?
So this is the importance of architecting data. And it's very often, and as you guys are probably very data people, it's unusual that you're actually making eye contact, but we have a lot of people in this company that make zero eye contact, and that's important because we need those people. It's about getting proper data, and it begins, this is a large, long answer. You have to be able to measure things, okay? And you have to be committed to be able to measure things, and therefore you need to commit to a lot of money. So you have to have that intent early on, bake it into your business practice and model, and you got to spend it and you got to invest it. And so at CityMD, we have a large IT team, very large, not just IT. We have IT people, and we have computer science people that hate being called IT people. So we have a lot of programmers that have developed software on top of our EMR, because the technology out there does not exist. And we had to develop our own combination of a CRM. It's called Aftercare, and we build it. And so we track every outcome as discrete data points. And we also have, it's not just, you have to have the intent, you have to have the tools, and you have to have software, and you build it. And it's married with a care coordination team. And we have over 100 people in our Long Island branch. And all they do is make sure that every T is crossed and I is dotted, and every patient gets to the right place. So how do we do this? So in particular, I'll give you an example. We are targeting diabetes, right? So it's not just convenient care, it's not just easy access, it's not just fluff. 50% of our patients don't have a primary care doctor. We'll see roughly 1 million patients a year. 500,000 patients, they come in for an ankle sprain. A lot of them are overweight. So we've picked on a single thing, the diabetes prevention program. Your BMI is over 35, there's a program for that. It's called the DPP program. We enroll patients into DPP program, and this is where it gets exciting because we partner with another company called Noom. Noom is some digital therapeutics. They have an online DPP program, and we're the only partner. And so we enroll all of our patients. So this is one of our initiatives. We focus on one at a time. Next is hypertension and smoking. And so when they come in for something else, we find other opportunities and population health initiatives. And because we exist, because it's easy access, it's not just they get an easy Z-Pack. No, they come in for something else, and they get better. And we prevent diabetes. So we actually can measure this. And we need to do clinical trials. And this is where we need to start doing this. We're going to measure DPP program with just Noom, how they do the online component. We had the YMCA come into our offices, and hopefully they'll do DPP at our site and see how it is offline, meaning at the brick and mortar site. And then we're going to compare how we do together. And so you measure these things. So we have an opportunity to do a lot of population health initiatives and to make sure that we provide great care. And so you need the will, you need the vision to do it, and you need the conviction to invest in the infrastructure to do so. And this is the 80-20 rule. This is everyone talks about 80-20, innovation, right? You have to have an 80%. If you don't have patience, you can't do anything innovative. So focus on your base bread and butter, make sure that's solid, and then you can go on to something innovative, such as this DPP program.
Thanks.
Okay. Question right here.
Hi, my name is Sam Reichberg. I work at NYU. And first of all, I'm going to take a story and I'm going to elicit the answer from anybody on the table. The issue with healthcare in this environment is who is the customer. And we talk about the patient a lot, but is the customer the patient or is the customer the person who pays for the patient? And they're usually not the same. A friend of mine who's a director of World Health at an Ivy League school right here in the city wanted to go to a country where malaria was prevalent and wanted to get medication for prophylaxis and couldn't get it. The insurance company would deny that. That's not in their coverage. They'd rather pay for a lifelong of therapy for malaria than the $10 that it costs for the quinine or preventive drug. So how could you be how can you optimize efficiency and be creative in an environment where, first of all, the customer is not the one that pays, and second, the constraints of regulation are pretty tight and introduce years and years into the progress of any new idea?
So before I answer that question, I'm going to ask a different question. Who here uses Google for search? Excellent. Who here pays Google for search? You're paying them for search? Oh, AdWords. No. Who pays for search, right? The answer is, okay, now, we know Google makes a lot of money, right? And clearly, they're not making money because you're paying them for the search. What you're doing is you're lending your eyeballs, and basically somebody else is actually paying them to be able to kind of get access to, right? They're paying them through AdWords or through other sources. Okay, so that's a classic two-sided market. Healthcare is even more complicated, right? Healthcare has this multi-sided market where, in fact, all the different players have to come together in coherence to actually make, pick on Richard City MD or anybody else actually work, or Adam, make anybody work, okay? And you need to get them all together. So when you ask the question of who's your customer, it kind of goes back to the question of, know your customer. All of them are your customer, okay? So there you are, trying to build a business. The patient, definitely one of your customers. But not enough. You also have an insurance company that's a customer. You may have a hospital system that's part of your customer. You may have a whole bunch of other partners, whether you think of them as partners or whether you're effectively partnering with them. Medical record system, care coordinators. I mean, there are a zillion YMCA you mentioned. They're all customers. And they're all partners in this process of developing healthcare. And if you want to be a successful business, you need to figure out how to create value propositions that address and make and satisfy all of your partners. Yeah.
Such a great question. One of the areas where we're actually, I feel like we're really privileged to be working on is in home care. Home care's always been like the sort of the poor cousin of healthcare. It's sort of like those kind of people over there. And it's, sorry again? Oh, sorry, I was saying that home care has always been like the sort of red-headed stepchild of, sorry if there are any redheads in the room. I've got a red-headed son, so I'm going to say a red-headed stepchild of healthcare. And it's now the front line of care. I mean, this is, the Affordable Care Act is all about shifting healthcare from being hospital-based out to being home-based. And we've been hired by a group of home care agencies in New York that all are coordinated by a couple of organizations. One's called Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute, PHI, and the other one's called Independence Care System. And they are looking after the people with the sickest of the sick in New York. These are people with late-stage ALS. These are people who have home care 24/7. They have 3 home care people who come and see them every day. What I think is wonderful about them is they don't call them patients. They call them members. They call them clients. And the whole attitude is about focusing on their experience. And by the way, these are not rich, these are not the people who are buying the penthouses in New York. These are dual eligibles. These are people who are, Medicaid, but everything that they get is funded through Medicare and Medicaid. And I think that is a lesson for how medicine as an industry should be thinking about their patients as clients, as members. It's a part of. Frankly, I think it's a part of medicine that's going to lead the way in terms of how this shift happens in this new model of healthcare.
Other questions? I saw some hands.
Hi, my name is Frangis. I'm working on a startup company, and we've got the business plan pretty much done. And we're at the point where we are trying to figure out our ask. And how do you navigate the fact that our financial model is, what we wish and what we believe we can do, with the reality of the amount of money we're asking for? In our case, we have several revenue streams which have already been tested. We're just putting them in a new format, a hybrid format that hasn't been done. So it's not like we have 2 years of R&D and it's some new. It's a lot of tested, already in the market services and products, but we're putting them all together to benefit the customer. So we're going to have revenue. We think we're going to have revenue generation and break even sooner than a lot of other new companies.
It really matters, like what does the company do? What does the company do?
What does our company do?
Yeah.
It's brain health services, both medical doctors, coaches, testing, and consumer products related to brain health, focus, and attention.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. So services models usually get a 1 to 1.5x multiple on exit. So the services side is not that sexy, from a valuation perspective. So you really probably want to talk up the the product side. Also, software, if you can somehow automate or make the service provided through the internet, web or mobile, that becomes software as a service, right? Just using those 3 factors I talked about before of team and momentum and what was the other one? I can't remember. What? Yeah, that's momentum. Yeah, market size. Yeah, what's the market size? He's my buddy. Okay. What's the market size?
The market size of the, we're going to be working with ADD patients. So we have the market size of the psychiatric health services, plus testing, plus consumer products.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it sounds like
technology products.
So if you had people that were immediately interested, it sounds like your valuation is between 2 to 3 million. That would be my take on it. But I mean, we can talk about it some more if you want.
I guess one of my questions, maybe this is, I don't think it's too technical, is we're projecting revenue and expenses. So when we look at how much we need to set up the first, environment or our first site, how much weight should we be putting on what we think we're going to make with revenue?
Okay, so this question is probably the hardest question in finance. What is the value of my idea? Because you don't have an operating company yet. What you have still is a unproven idea. You have a hypothesis that you basically need to test and validate in order to make it a viable business that's going to be profitable long run. Now, the good news for you and the bad secret is The investors, the angels, the VCs, they have no idea what your business is worth either. Okay, so everybody is going to make a swag, a scientific wild-ass guess as to what your business is worth. So there is no science here. It's going to be part of negotiation. Now, the question for you, though, is really gets back to how good a story can you tell about your business? And so if you have specific knowledge and experience that leads you to believe that this works, and you can show that it works, and you can demonstrate, and you've done it for a bunch of years, and if you can demonstrate that there are customers who are waiting in line to pay for your service, and you can do this lots of ways, actually. I mean, sometimes you can create a landing page and buy some Google AdWords and see how many people land on it. And then if they land on it, how many people click on the "I want to try it" button? You might even not have anything, by the way, behind it. Just see how many, count the number of people, percentage of people who click on the "I want to try it" button. There's a zillion ways to create these minimum viable products that can allow you to get a sense of what that market really is. And those are crucial because, again, not that that really does anything for you, but what it does is it shows that there's real interest out there, and it reduces the risk. Anytime you can reduce the risk, you can increase the valuation for your business. And so Joe gave the classic answer, by the way. What is a new business idea worth? $2 or $3 million. Why? Because that's pretty much what everybody asks for, and that's pretty much what everybody invests for. So, and if you have an idea that's a good idea, that's what they're worth. But the question is, can you convince somebody to actually give... but can you, but the question is, the question is,
microphone.
My view on the market. I probably saw 50 angel deals last year, so I'm pretty predictive for those numbers. But I mean, you could also restructure everything in the manner that he's talking about. What I was saying about being more sexy with the SaaS and things like that to get that up, right? But on the whole, until you get that significant momentum and traction, it's difficult to get beyond the 3 or the 4. I will say, though, that a lot of the Series A valuations are 20. So, if you're going to go out there and really have an ask, I might start out a little bit higher, like 7.5, 5, something like that.
So, again, it has to do with your business. Do you have intellectual property? And showing that you can actually tell your story well. And if you're interested, we could talk more. But
Can I just have one?
2 to 3 million is a good sweet spot, but the answer is it's hard to raise that money. I look at about 50 deals a month, and basically what I'd say is probably we don't fund more than about 3. So.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes, and we all came here to learn a lot, and hopefully we did. We also came here to network, so I want to give us enough time to have a little more wine, a little more food, and get to know each other a little better. And these guys will certainly be available, and you can ask them more questions there. But let's take 2 more questions, really good questions. Clay?
Hi, I'm Clay Williams from Cohere Health. One thing that I heard that was consistent from people is the importance of the right team, the right people, the right place, finding those people that you resonate with. I have a question. How do you find those people?
Total and they're all here. Well, they're probably the total and utter luck. Sorry, I don't really have a better answer. In my case, it was actually sailing. Other than my family and my business, my other passion in life is sailing. And my business partner, Stu, was a sailing buddy. And so we just knew each other, and those conversations led to one thing to another. Ed Guy also is a sailing buddy. I'm giving you a trite answer. At the end of the day, though, what really mattered was we had a good idea of kind of the 5 things that we thought we needed to do well to make a go of it. And that was, 1, we needed somebody who could lead the business, who kind of knew how to sequence it. That happened to be me. We needed somebody who was a subject matter expert, and that was my partner Stu in spades. We needed a chief technology officer, otherwise we couldn't build crap. The 2 other elements was the ability to raise money, and that actually none of the 3 of us had any particularly a great deal of experience in it, so we got outside advice. The 5th one, and was probably the most important one, was sales. And what we found there was that it was actually a combination of kind of left brain, right brain. In my case, being the left brain, in that I kind of know the process and I've done the manage a complex sale, and my partner Stu being the evangelist. So we kind of felt, okay, with those 5 criteria, between the 3 of us, with a bit of outside help on the capital side of things, we probably got enough to get us through. The most important element was actually the trust that the 3 of us could work at each other. We could shout at each other. We get over it. We get through the next round. We give each other feedback. We, have the trust of our spouses and significant others that we could actually go through that. And that we had the trust that we would, deal with the hard issues. So, for example, we cleared all the sort of, the equity stuff out of the way early. We put an operating agreement in. So, your point earlier on about getting all that crap out of the way early, it is so important, because I've been in another startup where we didn't sell a thing, but we spent every board meeting not talking about how we weren't selling anything, but who owned 37.5% and who owned 25.5%. It was completely ridiculous. It becomes a huge distraction.
Hi, I'm Clarence Bell from Montefiore. I have a question, and the premise of the question is, how do you, as an entrepreneur, adjust to changes in the market? I heard some great points from you guys, and I have no colleagues that have been in healthcare for 40 years and so on, and no one has a clear idea as to where it's going. We have different models. We have ACOs coming. We have the disrupt coming. So how, as a small company, do you adjust to all the changes going on in the industry?
I'm going to give you a very quick answer, and that is, if you don't have a good sense of humor, you cannot be an entrepreneur. So if you having a good sense of humor is probably the single greatest asset that you're going to bring into this process, because I can assure you're going to get some curveballs and maybe knocked out of the box a couple times. But the trick is not how often you get knocked out of the box. The trick is your ability to pick yourself back up and keep chugging away at and figuring out, if North Shore LIJ is going to do something, well, you're just going to do something else, and you're going to adapt, and you're going to fake it until you make it. So I don't know.
Hi, this question is for Adam. So I am a part owner of a home care company, The Redhead. Can you hear me? So my question is, what is your best tip for gaining traction, for introducing something new to that market? Because that market is really hesitant, especially with integrating innovative things such as healthcare app that you do. So how do you get them to use that product? We find a big struggle with getting them to use that product, and how long do you think we should stick with trying to get them to try something new or move on to the next thing?
So trying something new, and you have your home care agency is using a new technology product, or?
We're not using the new technology. We want the clients to actually talk to us more, or we want to create better communication between ourselves and them and the staff and their caregivers as well. But a lot of them are hesitant on using mobile devices or new technology. I think it's a fear of not understanding. And how do you get over that hump? How did you integrate that into Sarah
Care.
Sarah,
So,
sorry.
right, in terms of, I guess, this integration of technology in terms of a communication tool, I think for our families, we really just met them where they were most comfortable at the moment. And that is always changing, and you have to be kind of aware of that. Over the years, our programming has changed, how we communicate has changed. The technology tools are always very attractive because they're highly efficient, but in certain ways, but also sometimes depending on the type of communication you're doing, going old school works too. So it depends on what your goals are, and it depends ultimately on where your families and caregivers are or the aides are most comfortable communicating, and the goal is to get the right information you want back. So I wouldn't be as concerned about the means necessarily as what means is going to get you the information that you need and is valuable to you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I want a round of applause for the audience and the panel. Two plugs, okay. Health 2.0 New York City, we're 4,000 strong. We need your support. If anybody would like to talk to us about hosting events, sponsoring events, please let me know. I'll be glad to have a long conversation with you. There's plenty of opportunity. We have 2 more events coming up in April and May. One's on population health, which I think was brought up today, which is growing, and there's a lot of data behind it, obviously. So the next one's going to be on mental health. How is technology going to change access to mental health? And I think that's a huge topic that's not getting enough attention, and there are some startups that are really starting to develop some unique innovations in that area, and we're going to try to bring them in for a pitch-a-thon. So stay tuned for that one as well. And I want to thank our sponsors, CityMD. Dr. Park, thank you very much for having us tonight. Excellent space. Okay, and NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, thank you so much. Michael, excellent to have you on board, and hopefully you can join us. We're going to try to do another event in Hoboken coming up. There's a lot of startups out there, so we're going to take New York Health 2.0 and take it to New Jersey. We're going to cross the river, what do you know? Manhattanites aren't just total provincial little people like us, so we're going to get out. So anyway, there's wine, there's cheese, there's more food left. Please network, stick around a little while. We got time till about 9 o'clock. Business cards, find partners. Maybe you find your next partner right in this room. So we'd love it. There's been a lot of success stories at Health 2.0. Thank you and have a good night, everybody. Thanks to all the volunteers as well.